we're putting in motion a set of executive orders on day one for President Trump. They'll represent the most comprehensive border security plan in American history. Nothing like this has ever been done before. It is the most robust, sweeping, far-reaching set of executive actions and authorities necessitated by this national emergency that anyone has ever contemplated. And when that is put into place, it will, once and for all, restore American sovereignty. And it will also restore the idea that the Defense Department has a fundamental role, has a core role in securing the homeland from foreign invasion.
That's the one and only Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, bringing the heat on the blitzkrieg of executive orders that are going to be signed on day one of Trump's presidency. It's happening, gang. It's really just literally hours away, 96, then 72, then 48 hours away. The great return, the great restoration that will officially begin on January the 20th. Come on in, gang, one and all. Let's have some fun here today. As we count down the days, literally the hours until the new golden age officially begins, I thought it'd be fun to have a countdown of our own here. I want to count down the top 10 things Trump will do, according to his own words, on day one of his presidency. Now, this is actually based on an NBC report that came out today that talked about the top 11 things Trump will do. I conflated two of them. So they have a top 11. I got a top 10. I just conflated two. You'll see which ones. And this will help anticipate Christmas Day for January for all of us. The top 10 things Trump will do to unleash the new golden age on day one. You ready? You ready to count down with me? Well, let's do it, gang. Let's start with number 10. Drill, baby, drill. Now, one of Trump's most frequent promises, repeated in almost every campaign speech, is his unwavering commitment to energy independence of the United States. And that begins on day one of his presidency. Here is what President Trump said to Sean Hannity several weeks back.
Oh, because the media has been focused on this and attacking you. Under no circumstances, you are promising America tonight you would never abuse power as retribution against anybody.
Except for day one.
Except
Look,
what?
He's going crazy. Except for day one.
Meaning?
I want to close the border and I want to drill.
That's
drill,
not. That's
drill.
That's not.
No, no.
That's not retribution.
I'm going to be. He keeps. We love this guy. He says, "You're not going to be a dictator, are you?" I said, "No. Other than day one, we're closing the border." And we're drilling. After that, I'm not a dictator.
So that sounds to me like you're going back to the policies when you were president.
That's
all right.
Exactly.
So there you have it, gang. Day one, drill. That's the key. See, for Trump, in order to bring down energy costs, he's repeatedly argued that the United States oil production would have to drastically, increasing U.S. oil production would have to massively explode in order to drastically reduce energy costs, which in turn will drastically reduce cost of goods. And then finally, the cost of living crisis. So drill, baby, drill. Day number one, executive orders going out to get our energy independence back. Number 9, implement tariffs. Now, I'm sure you've all heard about Trump forming what he's called the External Revenue Service. Have you seen this? And this is going to be a department tasked with collecting tariffs from other countries exporting their goods to America. Now, since the election, Trump repeatedly promised that he would sign an executive order on day one to implement a 25% tariff on products imported particularly from Mexico and Canada, two of America's biggest trading partners. Back on November 25th, he posted this on Truth Social, quote, "On January 20th, as one of my many first executive orders, I will sign all necessary documents to charge Mexico and Canada a 25% tariff on all products coming into the United States and its ridiculous open borders. This tariff will remain in effect until such time as drugs, in particular fentanyl, and all illegal aliens stop this invasion of our country. Both Mexico and Canada have the absolute right and power to easily solve this long simmering problem. We hereby demand that they use this power. And until such time that they do, it is time for them to pay a very big price. So that's a big thing for President Trump. Bottom line, he's using tariffs as leverage. He's using tariffs as a bargaining chip. Again, this is something that a liberal international order would never, ever, ever allow any of the G7 countries to use. In fact, as I understand, the IMF, the WTO, they would be dead set against any use of tariff in a liberal international trade system. Trump's like, screw that. Those days are over. We're bringing in tariffs, and those tariffs are going to be used as leverage to bring certain nations to heel in order to realize MAGA, America First base principles. Number 8, he's going to sign a ban on trans athletes and gender affirming care. So that's where I conflate. The Newsweek article had those two as separate issues. I'm just putting them together. He's going to ban trans athletes and gender affirming care. Now, this one is huge, and it's part of the backlash against wokeness that's happening all across our country. Trump has long promised that on day one, he would institute a national ban on trans athletes competing in women's sports across the board. Those days are over. He would end as well Biden's cruel policies on so-called gender-affirming care for minors. You guys know what that means. It involves the physical, biological modification of the body of prepubescent children. A recent poll found that 74% of the public, 74%, oppose transgender athletes competing in female sports. And that is, of course, because the whole premise of sports is fairness. That's the entire premise of sports. If you don't have fairness, you do not have sports competition. I don't know what you got, but it ain't sports. And fairness, by its definition, involves exclusion. Certain people cannot be allowed to participate if a sporting event is to be fair. Heavyweights can't be allowed to get into the ring with lightweights. Heavyweight weightlifters can't be allowed to compete right alongside with lightweight weightlifters. Fairness involves exclusion. And so the vast majority of the country understands that if women are going to have a fair playing field in a viable sports tradition, trans athletes simply cannot be allowed to compete on the same field. And even more oppose puberty bar. I'm having my own Joe Biden moment. And even more opposed puberty blocker and a money. And even more oppose puberty blockers and other body modifications for prepubescent children. I got it out, Joe. I got it out. In fact, you'll notice that virtually all of these executive orders that Trump is signing on day one, they virtually all of them have at least 60% approval. This is huge. It's very similar to what we saw Newt Gingrich doing back in the Contract with America back in 1994. Every single one of those item issues, 10 item issues, every single one, he pointed out, had about 70% approval or above. And you needed to have that 70% approval because by the time the legacy media had come out against it in their 24/7 news cycle, and I think it was early 90s, CNN was there, 24/7 news cycle bashing whatever the Republicans were putting forward, the approval rating would probably drop down to the low 60s. So that's why he thought it was so essential that every one of the items on the Contract with America had at least a 70% approval rating. That's exactly what we're seeing Trump do. With all of these EOs, not one will come out that the vast majority of the country doesn't support. There's a very real supermajority behind the MAGA America First agenda. All right, number 7, cancel the electric vehicle mandate. Michael, we should have like drum rolls or some kind of like number 7, that kind of like, I don't know. I remember the old David Letterman countdowns, but alas, this is part of reversing and unraveling the disastrous Green New Deal that the Biden administration has imposed in our nation. So back in 2021, Biden signed an executive order setting a nationwide goal aiming for 50% of new cars and trucks sold by 2030 to be electric and zero emission. Not because you want them, not because there's any demand on the free market. No, this is just pure government fiat. This is pure government dictate. That's it. In November, at a campaign event in Houston, Trump affirmed his promise, saying that on the very first day of taking office, he will cancel Crooked Joe's electric vehicle mandate. So we can expect that on day one as well. Number 6, this is very much related. Trump is going to revitalize the American auto industry. Now, this is in effect a big thank you, a huge thank you, as you would say, to Michigan and their auto workers unions that backed Trump overwhelmingly back in November. Trump has said that on day one of his presidency, we're going to return to an auto industry that'll be fueled by American energy, sourced by American suppliers, and built by American laborers. And he made it absolutely clear this will happen on his first day in office. So this is a big shout out to the Michigan auto workers who have always traditionally voted Democrat in every single presidential election over the last 2 generations, suddenly switching over, defecting, and voting en masse for President Trump. The Republican Party, the Trumpian Republican Party, is now the party of the working class, and it really starts with the auto workers and their union that came out and unilaterally endorsed Trump, and this is going to be a big payback on day one for them, and hopefully that will be enough to ensure at least that the Republicans are smart, not like the idiot Tories in the UK that basically thwarted the mandate they got in December of 2019. But if they're smart, that should be enough to more or less seal the deal for the working class realignment in the blue wall states, so Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Very hardcore union vote. It's inordinately working class, far more than the country at large, and this is why Kamala never had a chance, by the way, of winning any one of those 3 states. Scranton Joe did, but not Kamala. I don't think Joe would have, don't get me wrong, but at least in 2020 he had the chance because he was Scranton Joe, and he could relate to the working class. I mean, not literally, but his rhetoric was convincing enough. Hopefully, as of Monday, with Trump returning the auto industry to full American control here in our borders, that's going to be enough to get the auto workers forever behind a new Trumpian working class Republican Party. Number 5, he is going to end the war in Ukraine. These are, if you're just joining us, these are the top 10 things Trump is going to do on day one of his presidency. This, according to a report by NBC News. They have a top 11. If you want to look up the article, I just conflated a couple and made it a top 10. He is determined to finally bring an end to the war in Ukraine. Now, as you all know, this is a top priority for President Trump. He's talked about it over and over again, and he's got a lot of cred right now, of course, just with the war in Gaza having come to an end. I just did a video on that earlier today. There's a mass consensus that's being formed, even among left-wing media, the legacy media, that there was no way the ceasefire deal would ever have been struck if it weren't for Trump. In fact, the Israeli-Hamas ceasefire goes into effect literally within hours before Trump is sworn in on Sunday. That's what Trump insisted on. He insisted that the killing stop and that both sides figure out a ceasefire before he gets into office. And he wants to do exactly the same thing here between Russia and Ukraine. He has said repeatedly that he will end that war within 24 hours of taking office, which, of course, the implication there, I want everyone to understand. I know it's a bold promise, but the implication to that promise is that he sees the Biden administration and NATO as the primary perpetuators of that war. So within 24 hours of him coming to office, in effect, he will remove those 2 impediments to peace. those two primary impediments to peace. I think he understands what's going on. We've talked about it endlessly here. I don't know if you saw, he actually he retweeted a post by Jeffrey Sachs that talked about the role of NATO and NATO eastward expansion that Putin has, but actually every single Russian leader since Gorbachev have been warning about since Eastern Germany was incorporated to Western Germany. And so he seems to get it. He seems to understand. We'll see. Hopefully he can keep the neocons away and I think fulfill a new multipolar peace that is going to require NATO to respect Eurasian orthosphere that is going to defend itself. There's just no way. There's no way around it. It is going to defend its sovereignty, its spherical sovereignty, just the way we defended it when Khrushchev violated our spherical sovereignty with the Cuban Missile Crisis. Number 4, pardon J6 defenders. So Trump has repeatedly promised that, in his words, he said this, quote, within 9 minutes of entering into the Oval Office on day one, he's going to be issuing a flurry of pardons for those charged and convicted of crimes on January 6th. They've already been written up. He just needs to sign them, as I understand it. As we speak, more than 1,500 defendants have been charged, nearly 1,300 convicted in the January 6th. Well, they call them investigations. We know what they are. They're kangaroo courts. Several hundred have either been released or have got no prison time. What's widely agreed upon is that I think we could pretty much say no one got a fair trial. Okay, at least that's my assessment, I should say. That's my opinion, right? Most particularly President Trump. He's the one who, more than anyone, experienced the most ridiculous sham kangaroo committee imaginable, where every single member had previously voted to impeach him. That was the prerequisite for actually being a part of that committee, Nancy Pelosi's committee. So President Trump has made it clear that he is going to be pardoning. I believe it's going to be all the J6 defendants, especially as he sees himself as a one who's been persecuted right along with them. And I think he will bring this very tragic chapter in our nation's history, at least as far as the defenders and their lives, defendants and their lives. He's going to bring a resolution to this horrifically politicized event. Number 3, the number 3 thing Trump will do on his first day in office: end all Biden-era border policies. And all Biden-era border policies. So among the flurry of executive orders he's expected to sign, Trump is going to eliminate the deferred action for childhood arrivals, that's known as the DACA program. He's going to reinstate the Remain in Mexico policy that requires migrants to do just that, remain in Mexico until their court hearings are processed. He's going to end catch and release. And of course, the big one, he will resume building of the wall, that big, beautiful wall, as he would say, and which, by the way, thanks to Texas, has continued over the last 4 years, but now the federal government is all in, and we don't have Paul Eddie Munster Ryan as speaker anymore to get in the way of all its funding, as we did back in 2017 and 2018. The number 2 thing that Trump will do on day one of his presidency: end birthright citizenship. This is what drives us in America crazy. I think we're one of only 2 countries in the world that has something called birthright citizenship. President Trump has confirmed he will end birthright citizenship by executive order on day one of his presidency. The key here is what Trump plans to end. He is intent on ending the practice of what's called anchor babies. So that's where if you have a baby within the borders of the United States, regardless of whether you're here legally or illegally, somehow all of a sudden, magically, the child transforms into a citizen of the United States, is suddenly entitled to any and all legal rights as a citizen, which in turn extends to the parents as well. So what Trump wants to do is he wants to broaden the widely agreed upon and recognized exemptions to that based on the 14th Amendment. So, for example, the 14th Amendment does not emphatically say that all persons born in the U.S. are citizens. That's not true. Obviously, a child born to a child born in the United States to a foreign diplomat is not a U.S. citizen. A foreign diplomat can serve here in the States for years, have lots and lots of kids born here, and not a single one of those children will be a citizen, not one. What Trump wants to do is make sure that if you're here illegally or temporarily and are not subject to the citizenship requirements of this nation, then if you have a baby, that baby does not automatically become a citizen of this nation. It just seems so common sense, and he's going to order an end to that practice on day one. And finally, that brings us to the number one thing President Trump will do on day one of his presidency, and that is, of course, begin mass deportations. This has been the centerpiece of his 2024 campaign, even more so than in 2016. And he has assembled a dream team to carry these mass deportations out. Here is Tom Homan, the new border czar, bringing the heat on CNN.
Many days after Trump is sworn in, before this effort to carry out the mass deportations begins, I know you said it starts on day one, but after how many days will we actually start to see that happening?
Day one. Day one will be ICE officers across the country will be out on the streets. Right out of the gate, President has made it clear, and I've made it clear, that priority right out of the gate is public safety threats and national security threats. And there's plenty of them to find, right? I looked at the data under the Biden administration. The deportation of criminal aliens have decreased 74%. So we have all those folks that the Biden administration failed to deport, plus you got this over 10 million encounters on the southern border that came across. We got a lot of them to look for too. So the public safety threats are plenty, and it's going to keep us busy.
I've heard it put. What somebody said, if Tom Homan were alive in the 10th century in Scandinavia, he'd be a Viking skull crusher or something like that. That guy is the real deal. Intellectually sharp, physically strong. I mean, this guy is, and just morally extraordinary. So there you have it, gang. The top 10 things Trump will do on day one of his presidency. It is going to be absolutely epic, and it promises to change not just America, but in many ways, as we're already seeing, the world for generations to come. Hey, gang, we often talk about how we can maintain and build up the conservative way of life. And one crucial aspect of that is your routine. Staying strong physically, mentally. It's not just about living longer. It's about living better, which starts with a good night's sleep. Now, I've partnered with Beam because they're a health and wellness company that's put in the time and rigorous research to craft science-backed solutions that truly optimize every system in your body from the moment you wake up until you lay your head down to sleep. Now, I've been using Beam Dream every single night for a while now, and it has completely changed the way I sleep. The endless news cycles, the uncertainty about our future, the weight of it all. I gotta be honest, it gets to me. It left me tossing and turning for hours. I have a very hard time turning my brain off. But gang, seriously, I'm not kidding you. Since taking Dream, I literally crash at night. I fall asleep so fast, and I sleep deeply and soundly all throughout the night. Beam Dream is made with the highest quality sleep-promoting ingredients to help you unwind and get that deep sleep we all need and deserve. In fact, it's become a nightly ritual of mine that I look forward to each and every day. If I may make a suggestion, I love their brownie batter flavor. You got to try it with a little cream in there. It's beautiful. Plus, I never wake up feeling groggy the next morning. I wake up feeling rested and ready to give my all, making a huge difference in how I show up every single day. Right now, you can save up to 35% off with my exclusive Beam discount. Just click the link below or scan the QR code on the screen and use code TURLEY at checkout. It's time to stop letting sleepless nights hold you back. Transform your sleep and your day with Dream, because you deserve it, gang. Click on that link or scan that QR code right now. All right, gang, a few weeks back around Christmas time, we had a guest on that you guys really loved. The comments were so encouraging, which it means everything to me, because he's a guest that I really love to have on the channel. I get to geek out with him on everything geopolitical. And obviously, you guys were geeking out with us as well. You really enjoyed it. We had a wonderful discussion with Constantine Von Hoffmeister and his book, Esoteric Trumpism, that explores the extraordinary transcendent dynamics behind the rise of Trump. And while he published it, months before Trump won in November, the book explains precisely why it was very likely that Trump would indeed end up winning again, precisely because of these transcendent dynamics that Constantine identified. Well, now he's got a brand new book out, a book that puts the Trump phenomenon into an even larger international context. The book is called Multipolarity. It has a wonderful foreword by the Russian geopolitical theorist Alexander Dugin, and its introduction, it's pretty good too, because it was written by yours truly. And it was an honor for me to write the introduction to this wonderful book. And now I get to geek out once again with the one and only Constantine Von Hoffmeister. Constantine, welcome back. Great to see you again, my friend.
Well, thank you very much for having me again. I really appreciate it. And well, since you already mentioned that you wrote a wonderful introduction to my book, I would like to thank you again for the excellent job you did. Like, it's a perfect introduction. I mean, it got a lot of people very excited about the rest of the content when I showed them the introduction.
Oh, great. Good. Well, congratulations, first of all, on the book. And thank you for the invitation to write the introduction. I love the book. It's so good. I got to tell you, Constantine, and I mean this seriously, I think it's the best overview, and literally like an almost introductory overview, but so rich to the rising multipolar world that I've ever read. And I've read a lot of books on multipolarity. This is so good. And I can't encourage our listeners more to click on that link, get a copy. You are going to love this book. Before we dive into the book, I was asking you beforehand, before we got on here, I'm very curious on your thoughts on Elon Musk getting involved in the heart of German politics, particularly his endorsement of the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland. You're in Germany, and your national elections are coming up in February. Is it February 20th, I believe? In just a few weeks. And Elon's put his full support behind Germany's own MAGA party, the AfD, saying he actually went so far as to say the AfD, only the AfD, can save Germany. So what's your assessment of that? How much of Elon Musk coming into German politics, how much of that is a game changer?
Well, it is certainly a small game changer, at least, because it really riles up the establishment, especially the mainstream media and the mainstream politicians, meaning the politicians who are in power now, the politicians who are basically enacting policies that hurt the German people and hurt the German economy. And Elon Musk is correct when he says that only the AfD can save Germany, because only the AfD has sound ideas for policies that should be introduced, but are not at the moment, because unfortunately the AfD is not in power. One of these policies would be to stop the mass immigration, because you have thousands and thousands of people from third world countries coming to Germany every month, basically. So the AfD wants to curb it. The AfD basically says that we need a merit system. So basically, we're not against immigration per se, but we want to invite talented people that can actually be beneficial for the German economy and German society. But the immigrants we're getting now, the majority of them are none of this. So, and Elon Musk pointed this out, and people go crazy in Germany when he says things like only the AfD can save Germany and the AfD is doing the right thing, etc. The reason why they're going crazy is because a lot of Germans, I would almost say maybe 40 to 50%, basically agree with what Elon Musk is saying. And you can see this when you read the comments. Elon Musk posts something about the AfD, and then you have thousands of comments by Germans. That the minority of the comments are derogatory, like, they're anti-Elon Musk, it's like, you're a fascist, you're a Nazi, you're in league with the devil, you work together with Donald Trump, etc. But the majority of comments by Germans are actually positive. They welcome the fresh air, basically, right? Like blowing through the German establishment and basically creating mayhem, right? But in a positive sense. Because now, so it's quite bizarre, because the mainstream media is saying that Elon Musk is interfering in German politics. They call it like foreign interference. And Olaf Scholz, the leader of Germany, the chancellor, the social democrat chancellor, he even said, stop interfering in our democracy, Mr. Musk. Right, but all of this is very strange and extremely hypocritical, because Olaf Scholz and all the politicians that are now complaining about Elon Musk, quote unquote, interfering in German politics, were doing exactly the same thing. When you had the presidential campaign last year, all of them openly supported Kamala Harris. Right? Like one of them even said, "Oh, I can't wait till this beautiful woman of color is in power." And I mean, the hypocrisy is all blatant, and people point this out in the comments in X. It's very difficult for the mainstream media to hide it, especially since people don't even follow the mainstream media anymore. Like yeah, because even X is now the #1 news source in Germany, and Elon Musk pointed this out as well. So a lot of people go on X and they get views that are really diametrically opposed to what the mainstream is trying to feed the German populace. And and the establishment, of course, doesn't like it, because they want to be in control of the narrative, but the control is slipping, right? And Elon Musk plays a huge part in this, right? So basically, he's sort of like a trigger, right? And you have a lot of people that follow him now, and also gather a large following on X, specifically like German influencers like Naomi Seibt, for example. She's very popular. And
did you hear the X Spaces interview that Elon had with Alice Weidel last week? I think. Yeah, it was very good. I thought it was so
fun.
good.
I watched it live, right? So
no, it was so good. And again, I think there's just a lot of people, particularly here in the States or just North America in general, around the world, never heard any interview with any AfD official ever, and all of a sudden they're like, wait a minute, where's all the where's all the extremism, where's all the radicalism, where's all this far right? It just sounds like it's the most commonplace, almost kind of libertarian like party. It's just I thought she represented AfD very, very well.
Yeah, so did I, because she seemed very natural and down to earth. And that's what I enjoyed about the conversation the most, because it wasn't trying to be, I don't know, artificially profound or artificially deep. It was just basically two people having a friendly conversation about different topics. And some of the topics were extremely relevant.
Yeah, I thought it was very interesting. She was asking him a question like, why do you want to go to Mars? What's the point of that? It was a great, it was a lovely conversation. And again, it just showed that it's a new era where we don't need the BBC. We don't need Deutsche Welle, or we don't need these mainstream institutions to constantly censor the conversation always around a narrative that benefits the neoliberal establishment. It's just wonderful. It's just beautiful to see.
Yeah, the really odd thing is that the AfD is, like you already stated, is not far right at all, and it's definitely not a Nazi party, and they're definitely not fascists. They're basically conservative libertarians, the AfD, and this is pretty much what Elon Musk himself is, and I think this is why he supports them. And the problem is that the Overton window has shifted so far left in the last, I would say, 1 or 2 decades, that even a conservative libertarian party is decried as like the epitome of evil almost.
Oh, Constantine, it's insane. I mean, now with the trans issues, if you're just standing for women's rights, if you're a feminist today and you want to stand up for women's sports, you're now officially far right as far as these people are concerned. It's insane.
Yeah, it's utter insanity. Well, the strongest party in Germany right now is the Christian Democratic Union,
CDU, yeah.
which pretends to be conservative, but
Right.
not
Right.
really
They're
conservative.
neoliberal, yeah. The total neoliberal, yeah.
Because they support all the Green Party and Social Democratic Party policies like mass immigration, the gender insanity, wokeism, etc.
Everything, yeah.
And pretty much only the AfD is opposed to this. So the AfD is it literally is the only party that can save Germany. And if you look at what the CDU, the Christian Democratic Union, was like 20 years ago, it's almost the same as the AfD is now, right?
Right, exactly. Well said.
So basically, the AfD wants to go, the AfD's position and what the AfD stands for was basically completely mainstream, not even that long ago, 1 or 2 decades maybe, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, even Obama was in 2008 was opposed to gay marriage. You know, Hillary Clinton, same thing. It's just exactly the Overton window for our elites have shifted so far to the left. I think, and it seems to be happening more and more, particularly in Western Germany. It's just left the majority of the country, at least it seems, alienated. Hopefully, I mean, we'll see if in the UK, both the Tories and Labour seem to have really opened up. They've gone so far alienating on the left that they've opened up a new majority for the taking. And if Nigel's smart, he's going to bring reform to take that new majority. And it looks like that's what Elon is trying to carve out for AfD. There is a true center that is conservative and that is traditionalist, but that is also innovative and wants to grow the economy and so forth. That's for the taking, and AfD is it. Only AfD can do it. I want to go into your book here because it's so good. I want everyone to do it. Make sure you click on the link below, order Multipolarity by Constantine Von Hoffmeister. It's an absolutely wonderful book. Also, if you have not gotten Esoteric Trumpism, grab that as well. We'll have both links. And also, Constantine has a really great article on Elon Musk and his role with the AfD and German politics coming up. That's also very good on his Substack. So there's a link there to his Substack that I'm a member of that you can join and keep up with his work. He publishes an article, every couple of days. It's very impressive stuff. So let's start with the basics, Constantine. For those who may not know, what is multipolarity? What is a multipolar world? And how does it relate? How is it different to the world that preceded it?
Well, we're basically already living in a multipolar world now. Before the multipolar world, we had the bipolar world. Let me rewind. So 1945, the end of World War II, you had two superpowers. You had the Soviet Union and you had the United States of America. So it was basically a bipolar world. Like these two powers divided up the world among themselves. You had NATO, which was basically controlled by the United States, which included pretty much all Western countries. And then you had the Warsaw Pact, which was controlled by the Soviet Union and pretty much included all the Eastern European socialist communist countries. And the two systems were diametrically opposed to each other ideologically. Yes. So, but you still had two powers. So the United States of America was not the all-powerful hegemon that could basically dictate to the rest of the world what to do, because you still had the Soviet Union standing up to the United States. And of course, the same was true vice versa. So you had a sort of balance in this bipolar order. And then in the early 90s, the Soviet Union collapsed because of internal chaos and mismanagement, basically. So the Soviet Union ceased to exist. And the Soviet Union broke up into separate nations, like the Russian Federation is one of them, like Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, Armenia,
Georgia,
Turkmenistan, etc. Like all these countries were originally part of the Soviet Union, which was basically one country. It was an imperial structure. But this empire broke apart into smaller nations. The largest of these nations, of course, is the Russian Federation, which still exists today. So in the 90s, you had complete chaos in Russia, which was basically exacerbated by agents from the West, especially the United States, but also Western Europe, that try to destabilize Russia and exploit Russia for its natural resources and basically install a very liberal democratic government that would be easily controllable by the United States and other Western powers. And this actually worked for a couple of years. So for a couple of years, Russia was basically on its knees and was basically completely exploited, or almost, I would say, oppressed by the West, until Putin came to power, of course, and he reversed all. He changed course, of course, and insisted on Russia's sovereignty. And he improved the economy, raised the living standards of the Russian people, built up infrastructure, got rid of a lot of corruption, mafia-like structures, etc., and basically built Russia into what it is today. It's another superpower, right, with its own interests. And of course, you also have other countries like China, right? So you have to have the rise of China, which is like the economically extremely powerful at the moment, right? I mean, cannot be underestimated. And then you have China. China is also growing at a lightning speed, basically, the economy and the development. I lived in India, right, for 3 years. And the last time I was in India was like several years ago. And I lived in Mumbai. And they were just starting to build a lot of the high rises in the center of Mumbai, but they're all finished now. It's like, it looks completely different within like 3 years. It's like becoming like almost like a Blade Runner looking city. So you have all these there's like really massive, almost like futuristic developments happening in these ascending civilizations that are becoming more and more powerful. But these civilizations like India, China, Russia, so like you said in your beautiful introduction, you said you have like Confucian China, you have Hindu India, and you have Orthodox Russia. And this is what makes them different from Western countries. Because say, for example, I also lived in Russia for 12 years, so in Moscow. So in Russia, you have a tradition that is still alive, right? Because in the West, you also have some tradition and heritage, but it's almost like it's museum quality.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's pushed into the periphery. Yeah.
But in Russia, people still live the tradition. So and they're still inherently very conservative, right? So they're pretty much like you and I, but it's the majority of the population, right, in Russia. So they're very, very conservative. And I always tell this to my American friends, like from the red states, that like my Republican friends, or conservative American friends, I always tell them that basically like Russians and you're the same people, basically, right? You're basically brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
And I see no reason why there should be any animosity between Russia and the United States. Like this animosity is artificially engineered by liberal forces, basically. Yes. It is completely unnatural. I mean, you're basically neighbors. Like, what is the distance between the United States and Russia? It's like 60 miles, right?
Yeah, right. With Alaska, exactly. Yeah.
Bering Strait. Like, wouldn't it be a good thing to build a tunnel under the Bering Strait so you can take a train from Moscow to New York?
And even closer if we get Greenland.
Even better when you have the American Empire. Well, let me just. I just want to wrap up the introduction real quick. So basically, you have these civilizations that are basically awakening now and rising up and claiming their place at the global table, basically. They don't want to be dictated to by the West anymore. Right. Mostly because they don't share the West's values, right? Like they have traditional values with traditional gender roles, none of that LGBTQ weirdness, and they don't believe in wokeism and that critical race theory and all that stuff, right? So they believe in healthy families in their ethnic group, and they believe that these values have been around for hundreds or even thousands of years, and they should not be discarded simply because the West says they're not fashionable anymore. Yes. Right. So if you're Russian, and that's why these civilizations are sick and tired of the West telling them what to do, because they see the hypocrisy of the West. They see the West talk about democracy, the West talks about freedom and self-determination, but the actions on the world stage that the West is engaged in speak a completely different language, right? Yeah. Because the West, the problem with the West is that the West still believes in the white man's burden, right? Like Rudyard Kipling's poem, like during the British colonial era in India, when India was a British colony, like Rudyard Kipling, the famous poet, wrote the Jungle Book, that everybody knows the Jungle Book, of course. But he was a staunch imperialist and colonialist. Like he believed, the white British man has to help the downtrodden, primitive, savage peoples in the South, basically, like places like India, right? So he had this superiority complex. But in his opinion, and in the opinion of many people at the time, which was the 19th century, they believed they were doing a good thing, right? They believed they were helping these people, right?
Can I just interrupt, because you have a whole chapter on this that I think is actually really fascinating, and I think it'll blow people's minds. Where you talk, it's I forget what its exact title, but it's something like liberalism as a form of white supremacism, and it's so wonderfully ironic, because it's always liberals who are the first to accuse others of being white supremacists and racists and so forth. And so that was, you are going exactly where I was going to ask you to just elucidate how liberalism, it's actually liberals, Western liberalism, that is radically racist.
Well, this is correct, because like Rudyard Kipling and his compatriots in the 19th century, the British imperialists, they believed they were bringing civilization and enlightenment to the savages in India and Africa, etc. Today, you have the liberals who claim they're anti-racists doing exactly the same thing, right? They're saying, like, we need to attack Iraq or Afghanistan because they oppress women there. Or they don't have a democracy, they have a dictatorship, they have an evil leader, you know. But then why can't these societies have the kind of government that they want? Like, why does everybody have to be a democracy? Yes, and this is the essence of multipolarity, basically. The essence of multipolarity is that you have different civilizations, different poles, right? Because after the bipolar order, Soviet Union and United States, after the Soviet Union collapsed, then you had the unipolar order, which was the United States was not only a superpower, it was basically a hyperpower. It was the only power that mattered, basically, in the world, and nobody could stand up to the United States, right? But this is completely different now, right? And you see this in the Middle East, what's happening, and you see it in Ukraine. Like, you see that America does not get its way anymore. People don't listen to it basically anymore, and there's not really much America can do about it.
No, I think
especially with big countries like China or Russia.
Yeah. I think it was August 15th, if I recall, is the exact day. August 15th, 2021. The withdrawal from Kabul catastrophe that the world all witnessed. I couldn't believe my eyes when I saw, I think it was within a week or two, Francis Fukuyama writing an article. And I think the article was basically that the title was, the end of the American era, or the end of the American order, or something like this. Can you just the contrast between what he was writing in 1991 and 1992, end of history. This is it. Liberal democracy is the way to go. There's no, Mearsheimer talks about it. It's almost, it's kind of a Marxist-Leninist sort of stuff where, it's Fukuyama saying it is inevitable, in a Hegelian sense, the world is going liberal Democrat. There's no stopping it. There's no other alternative. And then you get Charles Krauthammer after 9/11 saying, well, if the world is going to go there anyway, why not make them? Right. So it's almost like you have Marx and Lenin kind of coming together there. It's and the theorists, the Marxists, as it were, of the end of history thesis, just a week or two after Kabul just basically threw up his hands and said, well, it's over. It's all imploding. It's so interesting too, Constantine, because we'll always hear the maxim, politics is downstream from culture. A lot of people recognize that. I've noticed that both on left and right politically. Politics is downstream from culture. Well, if that's true, and you have lots of different cultures, then by definition, you're going to have a lot of different politics. And it just seems like this unipolar globalist world tried to turn that on its head.
Well, of course, because it's basically an orchestra of civilization, multipolarity. And each civilization is an instrument. And you have to play together to make the world a beautiful place, a dynamic place, and an adventurous place, and also an optimistic place. Because in a unipolar world that tries to impose its way of life, the liberal way of life, democracy, wokeism, feminism, gay rights, etc., would be a very, very dour, boring, and depressing place, because you would have strip malls, McDonald's, Starbucks, everywhere. Everybody would be watching the same movies, same TV shows.
Yeah.
And
I've heard it, Constantine, I've heard it called the Orlandoization of the world.
Well, that's a very good term, right? So basically the wonder of the world would be completely missing. Yes. Right. So the beauty of the multipolar world is that you have different civilizations, different poles, and they're not obligated to follow the same way of life or even the same governmental structures, right? They can choose their own path. So you could have like the West with its democracy and liberalism, but then at the same time you could have a monarchy in another civilization, or feudalism in another one, or communism in a third one, if that's
or a theocracy. Yeah,
a theocratic state. I mean, there's nothing really that is not possible, right, in a multipolar world. Yes, I mean, they shouldn't follow the same models, basically.
And yet, in your book, you also talk about, in the midst of this diversifying world, you also talk about a transcendent unity there. And again, that's why I think you just this is such an excellent overview of multipolarity. You introduce to the reader many important concepts that are coming, that are emerging as a result of this rising multipolar world. And one of them is a very important one, wonderful German word called Dasein, a concept developed by the philosopher Martin Heidegger and the Russian geopolitical theorist Alexander Dugin has used Dasein as a, I think, hopefully I'm getting this right, sort of as a new unifying theory in a fully multipolar world. And that's what makes it so astonishing. It brings unity, but always in the midst of diversity. You can't have the unity, ironically, without the diversity. Do you mind? And you being a German speaker, thank you for it, because Dasein could be a very abstract concept. Heidegger could be very hard to read. And so I'm glad we have a native speaker who could read the original text and help translate it for us. So, but if you could explain Dasein and how it relates as a unifying theory to a multipolar world.
Well, Dasein means being there, right? Means being there in the world, being aware of your own existence, being aware of the fact that you are sovereign as an individual, right? And you're sovereign as an individual because you know that you are finite. You are aware of your own mortality, yes? And this is what drives you, basically, according to the German philosopher Martin Heidegger, yes, to achieve great things or to do anything, basically, yes? It is the awareness of your own being in the world, yes? So this is the essence of Dasein, being there. And the Russian philosopher Alexander Dugin used the same concept of Dasein, being there, but he transferred it from individuals to peoples, meaning nations or ethnic groups, basically. He said that each people also has its own Dasein, right? Has its own, how would you say, raison d'être, for existence, basically. Yes. So he said there are different Daseins in the world, and this is the essence also of multipolarity. So the globalists, they would argue there's only one Dasein, basically. The only Dasein that matters is that we have equal rights, we're all individuals, we're all consumers, we're free.
Liberal democracy, corporate capitalism,
free to vote for parties, and whatever they think is important, right? Multipolar thinkers believe there are different Daseins in the world, and not just one. And each people has its own Dasein, meaning has its own definition of existence itself, the meaning of life, different belief systems, the afterlife, philosophy, or even the way people view the world around them. The whole perception is different, right? And this is why different peoples choose different governmental structures. They choose the governmental structures that suit their own Dasein, basically. Yes, that's why you have in China, for example, I mean, it's nominally, it's communist, right? But in reality, it's not really communist, as we all know, right? Because from what I know, I've never been to China, but I read a lot about it. From what I understand, is that China is still deeply traditional, right?
Yes.
And they do follow the Confucian teachings. And they're very proud of their culture and the history and the heritage. And this is also reflected in the media that they produce, like blockbuster movies, TV series about different historical events. And this is the same in Russia, right? If you look at Russian movies, they make a lot of patriotic movies, and not patriotic movies in an ironic sense, like they do in Hollywood very often, right? In Hollywood, they produce patriotic movies, but always with some, well, nowadays with sort of like a twist of irony or even satire, right? Okay, but in Russia, I would say the movies are very pure, and they're I wouldn't say naive, but they're very, very
idealistic.
Idealistic would be a good way to put it. They're very idealistic, but idealistic in a very optimistic sense, because they show movies about the past, and the reason why they do this is because they want people to feel pride in who they are, so they can build the future based on the values that the past teaches them, because it is the values of their own ancestors that are being carried on into the future, right? And this is the essence of Dasein, basically. When you are aware of who you are, what you are, and who your ancestors were, and who your children will be. Yes, and it is the core of your being to belong to a certain culture in certain society, and you feel that you're an integral part of it, like one link in a long chain, basically.
You're part of a story, a great grand story. There's that beautiful scene in The Lord of the Rings when Frodo and Sam are chatting, and Sam at one point said to Frodo, they were talking about the stories that they used to read as children, just about good and evil and darkness and heroism, and then Sam at one point says, "What stories do you think they'll be saying of us one day?" So it's just seeing yourself. We love stories because we're in one. In the end, I like thinking of that as a notion of Dasein is that every culture every civilization has its story, and we're all part of this amazing book. That's, to me, that's kind of what Dasein is. It's this being, but we all have our own chapters, our own books, our own individual stories, that no one can come on in and say, like in a Mordor fashion, and say, that's it, one size fits all, and whatever culture you had, throw it away, because again, that where I think you got in that chapter so brilliantly, we know better, we're more sophisticated, we're more advanced. One of the chapters you talk about is the on Africa, which I really appreciated, again, because I don't see this a lot in people's writings, but we've seen obviously a number of very successful political coups over the past year in the Sahel region, particularly in Africa. So these are nations like Gabon and Niger and Mali and Burkina Faso. And they've all staged very successful uprisings against their pro-French, pro-globalist governments. A lot of people don't realize, though, how these coups are very much part of this larger, geopolitical transformation into a more multipolar civilizational world. You have a chapter in your book on Africa and sort of the expelling of the last vestiges of French colonialism. Do you want to develop that a little bit for us? It was really fascinating.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. Basically, what is happening now with the different coups that we are reading about or witnessing is that different African nations are trying to take back sovereignty, basically. And they're trying to kick out the neo-colonialists, like the French, for example, because the French have a huge presence in Africa still, as do the Americans, and now the Russians as well. So, but they're trying to get rid of these neo-colonialists and trying to take back control of their own nations, because what happened was you have the scramble for Africa at the end of the 19th century at the Berlin Conference. Berlin Conference in 1884 to 1885, where the European powers basically divided up Africa into spheres of influence or spheres of control, right? Where like different European nations were taking control of different areas of Africa, exploiting the resources and basically oppressing the people. And taking away the people's Dasein, basically, if we can mention Dasein again, because they were imposing like a completely alien way of life on these peoples. And the same with the nations. A lot of the nations in Africa are artificial creations because they were created by the colonial powers, who arbitrarily, basically, drew boundaries across the African continent that somehow were completely unnatural, because they went between tribes and straight through the heart of peoples, basically. And now you have a movement in Africa that is basically trying to rectify the situation, to unify Africa again and see Africa as one civilizational pole among many in the multipolar world. And I'm talking about the African continent as a whole, because you have the ideology of Pan-Africanism, which basically says that all Africans belong to the same root, basically. I mean, of course, you have different African tribes, you have different languages, but all of them are connected. They're basically one people, like you said earlier so beautifully. There's unity in diversity, and the same, of course, is true in Africa, but there is unity, and they emphasize the fact that African peoples, not only on the African continent, but also in the diaspora, like say in Europe and the United States, that all these people belong to the same civilization. And they want to revive the spirit of the civilization so that Africans can feel proud again of the powerful pole that they really belong to. And politically speaking, this is evident in the fact that a lot of African nations are actively enacting policies that are making it very difficult for neocolonialist powers like France to keep their control, basically. Yes, and I think Russia plays a different role in Africa. Yes, because they were basically invited.
Exactly, that's the difference, I think. Yeah,
they were invited to support them against the forces that are trying to undermine the liberation of Africa.
And that's been some of the Russo-African conferences that have been held. I noticed in Moscow in particular. That's actually all about supporting cultural sovereignty of the African continent and different nations and the like. It's just so fascinating, because I love how multipolarity does literally just kind of embrace the whole world and its rich tapestry of cultural diversity. I like to say we're the true multiculturalists. That's it. That's the irony,
Yes, that's true.
Can you explain? I mean, you talked a bit about the BRICS economic bloc. We talk about that a lot on this channel as well. So I know our listeners are going to be familiar with BRICS a bit. But I mean, boy, I mean, it's just growing every year. It's just adding more and more members. I just saw Vietnam now looks like they're going to be the next member. How is BRICS trying to realize this multipolar vision of the world? How a nice way of thinking about it is, how is BRICS different than, say, its rival, the G7?
Well, BRICS, like you already mentioned, BRICS' insistence is on sovereignty, right? They basically insist that sovereignty must be respected, the sovereignty of different civilizations and nations, and it should not be undermined. And one of the things I think that BRICS is trying to achieve, which is very important, is a de-dollarization, basically, which will be beneficial to the global South and countries like Russia, but it will not be beneficial to the United States for obvious reasons, right? So if the dollar uses its status as the world's currency, then you will have a much worse financial collapse in the United States than you already have. But I think it's inevitable, right? And the reason why I think it's inevitable is because of the actions of the United States and the West itself. Right?
The weaponization of the dollar. I mean, the blowback was inevitable. Yeah.
Right. The point, like a good example is like, okay, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So the West thought it was a good idea to punish Russia for, invading Ukraine by putting sanctions on the Russian economy. So you had the United States putting sanctions on Russia, and you had the European Union follow suit, of course. Now, the point is, though, that if other countries see that if the United States does not agree with your policies, they can just punish you financially with the dollar, then we would be crazy to still use the dollar or keep our assets in American banks or on Western bank accounts, because they're basically being stolen now. Like you have a lot of Russians that had money like in European and American bank accounts, and it basically just seized
hundreds of billions of dollars.
Yeah, and not just money, but airplanes and ships and boats, etc. They just
gold reserves. Yeah,
it's crazy. They steal the assets. So what sane country would keep their gold in the United States after witnessing this? Right? They would see like, okay, so if I keep my gold in Fort Knox, and then the American government disagrees with my policies, they might just steal my gold. I cannot leave it in the United States, because it's not neutral territory. They always take sides, and like you said, they use their own currency as a weapon against people or governments they disagree with, and because of this, you have a sort of revolt right now. In the form of BRICS, in the form of a new organization that tries to form its own infrastructure, basically, that is independent from Western-dominated institutions like the International Monetary Fund or even the World Bank. Yes, so this is also a very important part of multipolarity, because it will be beneficial for the world in the long run if more countries become sovereign, because then mankind will have, I would say, different options for the future, because we don't know which one is the best one. Could be liberal democracy, but could also be a theocracy or a monarchy. We don't know. But it's good to have different options open and different paths towards the future, basically. And we can only have these different paths if we have a multipolar world.
Yeah. And again, what I love about the book too is it's not just theory. I mean, you're showing practically how this world is being built, and BRICS would be almost like the cardiovascular system, as it were, of the new multipolar world that's rising. Let's close the loop, Constantine, here, and come full circle. We started talking about Europe. And you have a very good chapter on the future of Europe. You have your Substack is named after Guillaume Fay's fascinating concept of Euro-Siberia. You have a whole chapter on that. And that is where you see, in effect, if I understand correctly, this is where Europe will take its own unique place in this rising multipolar world, but it's even more astonishing and more vast, geographically vast than I think anyone ever imagined. Can you develop this notion of Euro-Siberia?
Well, it's an idealized vision of the future, which hopefully will come to pass. But of course, it's all up for grabs. We don't know yet, like, what's going to happen. But well, what I envision is what you already mentioned, Guillaume Faye, the French philosopher and political thinker. He coined the term Euro-Siberia, and Euro-Siberia would be an empire stretching from Lisbon in Portugal to Vladivostok in Russia on the Pacific. Yes, so it would have, I think, 15 time zones, right? So it would be unbeatable, basically.
Yeah.
Well, that was his idea, because he believed that all the European peoples, like different nations, the Germans, the French, the Italians, and the Russians, they're all related. So this is similar to what I was saying earlier about the Pan-African movement. They're basically saying you have different nations and languages and different traditions in Africa, but the people are all related. They're still all Africans. Yes? So that there's like some core African civilization. And Guillaume Faye said the same is true in Europe. Like, you have the Germans, you have the French, etc. But deep down, they're all Europeans. They have the same values. They shared history and shared traditions. And you have lots of antecedents for this, like the Crusades, for example. Yes, there were like pan-European armies, basically, fighting against the Muslims in the Middle East, yes, back then, 1,000 years ago. A very beautiful example or symbol is the St. John's Church in Valletta on the island of Malta, yes, in the Mediterranean, because you had the Maltese Knights, which was an order, right? Originally also founded in the Crusades, but it was a pan-European order. And in this cathedral, in the capital of Malta, which is Valletta, it's a very, very small capital because it's a very small country. I visited this cathedral several years ago, and in the cathedral, you have like different chambers, and each chamber is dedicated to a different European nation, because you have different European knights from different nations that joined the Order of Malta. Yes, and together they actually defeated the Turks that laid siege to Malta, and they were numerically far superior to the Maltese Knights. But the Turks were actually defeated by the Maltese Knights at the Great Siege of Malta. Is a very important historical event, and there's a siege monument in front of this church in Valletta, where friends of mine who are Maltese put flowers every year on the anniversary of the victory against the Muslim invasion. So, and this is just an example of the pan-European spirit that Guillaume Faye espoused, because he believed that European peoples are basically brothers, and the idea of nation states is obsolete, basically. Yes, because he believes, as do I and many other people today, that we now basically live in the age of state civilizations. And state civilizations is basically a scientific term for empire. It's the same thing. So, and what is an empire? An empire is basically a unified political structure that encompasses different ethnicities, different peoples, and different nations. But the nations are not sovereign anymore, because you have an empire. They can have autonomy within the empire, but they're not independent nations. And the benefit of this is that it prevents fratricidal conflict. Conflict that we witnessed in World War I and World War II, when you had the nations of Europe going at each other, basically, and killing each other by the millions, yes, because of outdated concepts like nationalism. Yes. And this is why I don't consider myself a nationalist, and I never have. Yes. I mean,
you're more, a civilizationalist. Yeah.
Right. Now, I understand the value of nationalism, of course, and because if the nationalists fight against the globalists, and in that sense, I support the nationalists.
You're right.
But I think this is only a stage. Nationalism is only a stage to something greater, which is building an empire.
Civilizationalism.
And I think we're already living in the age of empires again, because I mean, very often people don't want to hear it, but I believe it's true. Yes, I believe America is also an empire, right?
Yeah.
In its structure.
Right.
And now with Donald Trump talking about
And Greenland,
Greenland, and maybe even Canada, right? And then it would be a beautiful American empire. I'm not even opposed to it, to be honest.
I know you're not. I've read your work on your Substack. That's why I love chatting with you on it, because that's been my interpretive paradigm for Trump's language is civilization state paradigm. This is, I mean, you're seeing it in India, with they even just him renaming the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America.
Beautiful.
I pointed out that's what civilizationalist minds do. They rename things.
It's wonderful. Exactly. Yeah. I mean, in India, they did the same. They renamed all the cities because they reject the colonial names, like Bombay became Mumbai and Madras.
Exactly. Or even the shift from the Soviet Union back to sort of an imperial Russia, right? Leningrad or Stalingrad ends up becoming St. Petersburg.
Volgograd, right?
Yeah, there you go. Right, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So that's what I think. What I love about your book is it helps us to reimagine where things are going in a renewed world of the old civilizations rising again. And it's extraordinary. It's amazing. And everyone's there. China's there, Russia's there, India's there, Turkey's there, Africa, as you're pointing out. It was ironically over the last several years, it was United States and Europe. We were still living in the old 19th century sort of industrialized kind of world that was still looking for a modernist, one-size-fits-all political and economic system to impose on everyone else. And to everyone's astonishment, it seems it's like, no, the world, the non-Western world is the world of the future. And how are they doing it? By going back, literally like the movie, Back to the Future. They're going to the future by going back again, a Guillaume Fay archaeo-future sort of idea. I think in many ways, we were talking about this last time, how Elon Musk sort of represents that.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that Fyodorov kind of idea of the traditional and the tech trad coming together and in new and exciting ways. It's not even, it seems to me like the old green parties, which I'm glad to see are starting to collapse, at least not enough, but in Europe, where they have the old binary. Either we're going to be innovative or we're going to worry about the environment. It can't be both. And that's what I love about kind of this new archaeo-future civilizationalist world that says, no, it's both. We're a part of this world. We're a part of this created order. And so our innovation is there to enhance and transfigure the created order. We can be both technological and traditional and ecological. Oh, I'm doing three there. Traditional, technological, ecological, all comes together under the rubric of a revitalized civilization. I know cultural anthropologists for a century. Well, you have a wonderful chapter on there on cultural relativism. Cultural anthropologists have been talking about that for over a century now, that cultures are inextricably linked to their ecologies. Religions and religious traditions are inextricably linked to their unique ecologies. And so by definition, our music traditions, our political traditions, our religious traditions are all going to have this beautiful spatialized significance that does not pit ecology, and environment versus technique and technology. They fit together like a glove if you don't have this old industrialized 19th, 20th century mindset that globalists seem to have.
Well, exactly. And that's why it's very important to differentiate the ideas of empire and imperialism, because I would argue that in a multipolar world, in a world of empires coexisting, different poles, there would be no need for imperialism.
Right.
Yes? Because imperialism is basically a sign of globalism. Yes, imperialism is when you want to force your way of life, your religion, I mean, your political structure on other peoples and nations, whether they want it or not.
Right, exactly.
But in the multipolar world, the mentality of people in a truly multipolar world would be completely different, because they would understand that they live in a certain civilization that suits their needs and reflects their heritage and character. But they would also understand that other civilizations or other empires might have a different political structure and different beliefs, but they would automatically be respectful, because they would understand that it is the difference that makes the world a beautiful place and not the uniformity.
Yeah, that Dasein, going right back to it, that unifying theory to multiplicity. It's gang, it's a magnificent book. The chapters are nice and short and concise. And Constantine's a magnificent writer. Dude, your English is freaking impeccable. I mean, your English is it's better than most American native speaking English speakers. It is so good, and it really is. I think Multipolarity, the book, is really the single best, if I can call it, kind of introduction or primer or overview of this rising multipolar world. So I urge everyone to click on the link below, get yourself a copy of Multipolarity. It's a perfect complement to Constantine's previous book, Esoteric Trumpism. So if you haven't gotten that, make sure you get that as well. Both are ideal books for starting off 2025, as it were. This is going to be a historic year. This, I think, really is the year, and I'm sure Constantine would agree, this is the year of multipolarity. I mean, it's already there, but now it looks like, particularly the head of the West, as it were, the USA, post World War II, looks like the USA is ready to say, enough with globalism. Let's stake our place in this rising multipolar world. If that's the case, this book is going to help you map out, both practically and imaginatively, precisely what that world involves. So, gosh, Constantine, I could talk to you for hours. It's been a pleasure. Well, we have. We when we were together in Vegas, we chatted for quite some time. I know you're going to be in DC for the inauguration, so hopefully I will be there as well. We'll have to talk afterwards. We'll have to exchange our contact info to be able to hook up with each other there. But I'm really excited to be able to experience this historic moment with you, as well as a fellow multi-polar enthusiast. And boy, it's just we've got an amazing year in front of us. It's incredible stuff.
I agree with you 100%, and I'm really looking forward to the paradigm shift going into full blossom, basically, because that, I think, is what's going to happen after next week, basically, when Trump actually has the power. We will see tremendous change, and the change will happen very fast, I think. A lot of things can happen, and a lot of things are unpredictable, but I'm very optimistic. So I'm looking forward to the new multipolar order, or as you said last time, the renewed world order.
The renewed, that's right, that's right. And then next time we have you on, let's do it right after the elections in February. Maybe, hopefully, Elon is going to really make a difference there. Yes. I can't wait. That'll be so exciting to see. I'd love it. This is the beauty of a multipolar world, is you get a bunch of like Americans here on this channel getting excited about German politics, which I love, and UK politics and Hungarian and Italian. That's it. It's about seeing our cultures rise up and take back our national sovereignties and work together in doing it. It's just beautiful stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I really believe in this paradigm shift, and I really believe that we are becoming mainstream. We were relegated to the fringes, but now we are in the center, basically, in the spotlight, and gaining more and more power and becoming more and more popular, not just in the United States, but all over the West. I mean, you can see it happening everywhere. So we live in beautiful times.
We do. We live in beautiful times indeed. Constantine Von Hoffmeister, the book, again, is Multipolarity. Click on the link below. Get your copy. You're going to absolutely love it. Constantine, let's have you back again soon, and I hope to see you in D.C.
Thank you. Likewise. Have a nice day.
Hey, gang, are you getting the sense that globalists are gearing up for a pandemic scare after failing at the ballot box in November? Just weeks before President Trump's inauguration, California Governor Gavin Newsom declared a bird flu state of emergency, granting himself sweeping powers reminiscent of COVID-19 policies. Now, this comes after a severe case of H5N1 bird flu was reported in Louisiana. Critics like Nicholas Holscher warned that pandemic fears may be weaponized to challenge Trump's agenda, including the nomination of RFK Jr. to lead the HHS. Is this a health crisis? Or is it a power play? Well, last summer, Dr. Peter McCullough warned about the bird flu, linking the virus's rapid spread to gain-of-function research, now a common practice at many labs globally. Dr. McCullough urges early prevention just in case, recommending a contagion emergency kit from the wellness company. His medical board-approved solution with 5 critical life-saving medications like ivermectin, Tamiflu, a nebulizer, and hydroxychloroquine. Every household can now have access to these hard-to-get medications in the event of another pandemic. Get yours by filling out a digital intake form, and your kit arrives in 1 to 2 weeks. Don't wait until the deep state puts their plans into action. Stay ready for the unexpected. Click on that link below right now.